Welcome to Showing Up Anyway, the podcast for people who are not perfect. On this show, we talk about intuitive eating, fitness without obsession, and healing your relationship with food and your body. Hi, everyone. You're back for another episode of Showing Up Anyway. I'm Coach Adam, and look who showed up. You did, and I'm so glad you're here with me. I thought that following our episode on hunger a couple of weeks ago, it would make the most sense to turn our attention to fullness today. Why it's so hard to stop eating, what fullness is supposed to feel like, and how to actually stop eating when enough is enough. Because I don't think it just comes down to you not knowing what fullness feels like. I think you do, but there's levels to it, and often you don't realize how full you are until it's too late. Sometimes we ignore our fullness out of habit, or because what we're eating tastes super good and we don't want that feeling to stop, or because we want to get our money's worth. Fullness can feel a little bit complicated, especially for chronic dieters, and so that's where we're going to start today. So why is it so hard to feel when we're full? Well, like I said earlier, I don't think it's because you don't understand it. I think it's because you've been told over and over again not to trust that feeling. Diet culture has this stupid obsession about restriction. Like anything except being hungry is a bad thing. And somewhere along the way, fullness went from a biological cue to being treated like some sort of a sin. Kind of like if you feel full, that means you gave in. Does that make sense? So what ends up getting idealized is emptiness, hunger, control. Your stomach growls get glorified, and fullness, which is something that's supposed to be normal and neutral, becomes something we should never feel. And sometimes a feeling we're taught we should fear. And I mentioned this in a previous episode. It's ironic because when you constantly try to stay hungry and restrict, you have a greater tendency to overeat. It almost becomes unavoidable. The one feeds, for lack of a better term, the other. So instead of being able to stop when you're comfortably full, you almost need to binge eat, kind of like an automatic response. I think a lot of it has to do with the way we grew up, too. I suppose that's the case for a lot of food rules and diet culture. But a lot of people have a punishment history around fullness. Did your parents ever make you feel bad for going back for seconds? Did they ever tell you you're eating too much? Honestly, sometimes not even saying something, just the look that they'd give you made you feel bad, didn't it? Maybe you were raised hearing things like save room for dessert, or you don't need that. And so now, even as a grown person, fullness doesn't just feel physically uncomfortable, it also leaves you feeling bad, like you did something you should be disappointed in yourself about. I want to reassure you that fullness is not a mistake. It's a normal endpoint of eating. It's your body saying, I'm good, I've had enough. So if no one has ever told you this, fullness is not a failure. It is not laziness. It is not indulgence or weakness. Fullness is your body telling you exactly what it's supposed to when it receives enough nourishment. And you're allowed to feel that and stop at that point. So fullness is hard to trust. We know that, right? But why is it hard to feel it in the first place? Because even if you want to pay attention to your fullness cues, if you're genuinely trying to listen to your body, there's going to be a lot of things that can get in the way. If you've spent years ignoring your hunger, like I know a lot of you have, it makes a lot of sense that fullness feels unfamiliar too. Hunger and fullness are connected. They're two sides of the same coin. A lot of the barriers to feeling your fullness have to do with distractions, scrolling social media, watching TV, reading a book, eating while you're working, responding to emails. In fact, it's a lot like distracted driving. You know, when you're driving and you've got your phone up here, you really can't pay attention to one or the other, and it kind of gets dangerous. It's probably a little bit less dangerous to eat while you're distracted, but the same sort of thing applies in the sense that you really can't focus on what you're doing if you're distracted. Your attention is on both of those things and not just one. So I'd love you to answer this honestly. How often are you eating distracted? Every day? Every meal? You also might have a hard time feeling your fullness if you always finish your food out of habit. Did anyone else grow up part of the Clean Plate Club? You might not have ever officially signed up for it, but if you grew up being told to finish your food or not to waste it or that there were starving kids in other countries, well, then yeah, welcome to the club. Now, a lot of you might think finishing your food is harmless, even polite, but consistently eating until the plate is clean or the bag or the box or whatever is empty, even if it's past your fullness, not only leads to weight gain, which is not the end of the world, but it also takes you further away from your body's natural fullness cues. Instead of stopping when you feel satisfied, your finish line becomes visual when the food is gone. And I find it interesting because a lot of times this completely happens out of habit. When you open up, for example, a package of Pop-Tarts, how many are you eating? 2, right? Because that's how many is in the package. Or you make 3 tacos for dinner because, I don't know, that's just how many I always eat. Or you order a large number 4 from McDonald's because that's what you always get. We're not listening to our bodies by doing this. We are reinforcing a habit. But this is not a character flaw, okay? I'm not here to make you feel bad for it. This is just a chance to notice what's underneath these patterns and decide whether they're still helping you or whether they're holding you back. We already talked about how, for a lot of us, this started in childhood. You didn't get a choice back then. Maybe it wasn't just the guilt trips. Maybe you were part of a big family where food went fast, or maybe there wasn't always enough. You dealt with some food scarcity and you learned to eat everything while you had the chance. Over time, those survival strategies and food rules turned into almost automatic behaviors. You stop even questioning whether you're full. You just eat. Let's explore some clean plate drivers, okay? Some things that may have happened in your life that probably led to you needing to finish your food. These are I statements, okay? So pay attention because some of them might apply to you. I grew up in a big family where food was limited. If I didn't act fast, I missed out. I was raised to believe that leaving food was wasteful or disrespectful. Sometimes I didn't know when the next meal would be, so I always ate everything. I was only allowed to eat dessert if I finished everything on my plate. I was made to feel guilty if I ever left food uneaten. I automatically eat the whole portion of something, even if I'm not enjoying it anymore. When I eat packaged food, I usually finish the whole bag or the box. I eat everything at restaurants or buffets because I want to get my money's worth. I eat quickly and finish a lot faster than other people do. I worry about hurting someone's feelings if I don't finish the food they made for me. Do any of these feel familiar? Now, if you have a sibling, I want you to send this podcast to them because I guarantee they probably feel the same way. Okay, now if you want to try and break the habit of always needing to clean the plate, I want you to try this. At your next meal, try leaving just a bite or two left on the plate. Scary, right? Just a bite or two. The purpose of this is to try and start to retrain your brain and remind yourself that number one, you're in control. And number two, nothing bad is going to happen if you don't finish every bite. If you want to put a little more thought into your fullness during mealtime, you can start to try and estimate how many bites it's going to take for you to be comfortably full. You can ask yourself, is the next bite going to be my last bite? This is one of my favorite questions to help me get in touch with my body. Is the next bite going to be my last bite? This is what's known as the last bite threshold, okay? It's the moment that you realize your food is not really tasting as good as it did a little while ago, and that you've reached a level 6 or 7 on the fullness scale, and it's time to comfortably stop. When you catch that voice, and admittedly, it does take practice, it can be a really powerful cue. But you don't have to change everything overnight, okay? I want you to remember that. Just start noticing. That's what this practice can help with. The more awareness you bring, the easier it becomes to choose differently next time. Do you know what else makes stopping when you're full feel difficult? Telling other people no. You know when you're at your mom's house for Sunday dinner or the whole family comes over for a holiday or something, and then someone shoves a plate at you and says, "You've barely eaten, have more." Or your mom goes, "But I made your favorite." Or you hear, "Come on, just one more bite, you're making me feel bad." There is a lot of social pressure around food, and that could be one of the hardest parts of this work because it's not just about the food. It's about relationships. It's about love. It's about culture. In a lot of families and cultures, refusing food feels like rejecting the person offering it. And if you've been socialized to be a people pleaser or you grew up in a clean your plate household, saying no can feel pretty disrespectful. And I know that this is probably really easy for me to say as a white guy. Food really is not as much part of my culture as it is for others. But you are allowed to stop when you feel full. You don't need to justify it. You especially don't need to eat more just to make someone else feel comfortable. Honoring your fullness doesn't mean you're being rude or rejecting your culture. You can appreciate the gesture, the care, the tradition, and still say, "Thank you, but I've had enough." The thought of doing that might be entirely new and uncomfortable for some of you. So here are some phrases that you can use to help you say no. You're going to say them with kindness, but also with confidence. You ready? Jot these down. That looks or was delicious, but if I eat any more, I'm going to feel uncomfortably full. I can't eat anymore right now, but I'd love to take some home with me instead or grab the recipe from you. No thanks. Even just one more bite of this is going to be too much for my body right now, and I don't think you want me to feel sick. I've been trying to listen to my body better, and right now it's telling me I've had enough. I'm really enjoying this, but I want to stop before I feel physically uncomfortable. Wow, that was delicious. I don't want to ruin it by overeating. Okay, someone tell me how my acting was. And you can always just give a simple but firm no thank you. You don't have to over-explain it. You don't have to debate it. You're setting a boundary. And I get that that's not always easy, especially if you've never done it before. But with practice, those feelings of discomfort become a really powerful act of self-care. Setting boundaries is a little like learning a new language, okay? You're going to get better the more you do it. So next time someone comes over and shoves another plate at you, take a breath. Your body is not a trash can. You're not obligated to keep eating just because the food is available or someone else wants you to. Let's shift gears now and talk about what fullness is supposed to feel like, because most of us are really only familiar with two extremes. Either we are absolutely starving or we are uncomfortably full. We're not used to paying attention to the in-between, but that in-between is really where you should be focused. If you remember back to our hunger episode where we talked about the hunger scale, a 6 or a 7 is where I told you I wanted you to try and stop eating. That's where you are comfortably full. Now, the signs of fullness are usually pretty subtle, okay? Fullness is not a dramatic feeling. It doesn't usually slam you in the face. It builds gradually, and if you're rushing through your meal or completely distracted, you're gonna miss it. Here's some things you might feel. Okay, you might feel a slight distension or pressure in your stomach. You'll probably find that you're not thinking about food as much. You might not have the desire to eat anymore or as much. Your pace of eating is naturally going to slow down. You might start picking instead of just going for it like you were at the start. You might feel more energized, although you might also feel sort of drowsy. Just kind of depends on the person and the type of food, I suppose. And emotionally, you might feel more relaxed, less irritable, more pleasant, like, that kind of hit the spot, you know? Now, there's a lot of factors that can impact your fullness. How hungry you were before you started eating, that's a huge one. Okay, if you show up to a meal absolutely ravenous, you're probably not going to notice the point where you feel satisfied. You're going to blow right past it because your body is just trying to catch up. And that's not a willpower thing, that's just biology. We talked about being distracted when you eat. That's almost a guarantee that you'll eat more and feel your fullness less. This also happens when you eat really quickly. Also, how long ago was your last meal or your last snack, and how much did you eat then? And then, of course, there is the type of food itself. And I think it'll be a little helpful to understand what kind of different foods might affect you. There's going to be foods that contribute to your fullness, and there's going to be foods that don't keep you full, okay? Foods high in protein, like meat, beans, tofu, Greek yogurt, can help you feel more satiated. Fats like avocado, nuts, butters, oils, dressings can help slow down digestion in your stomach, and it slows down the digestion of other foods in your stomach. Carbohydrates like whole grain pasta, potatoes, rice, fruit, vegetables, those things have fiber, which help keep you full and adds volume to your meals as well. They also help balance your blood sugar and give you energy. Now let's talk about foods that don't offer much staying power, meaning they fill you up, but only for a short time. Some foods are low in calories, but high in volume, like raw veggies, plain popcorn, or broth-based soups. You might feel full in the moment because your stomach is literally full, but that fullness usually doesn't last very long. Then there are what we call air foods, okay? Things like puffed cereals, rice cakes, or Halo Top ice cream. Gross. They don't keep you full because they're low in fat and fiber and protein, and those are the things that actually help keep you satisfied. You'll also find this effect with a lot of low carb or diet foods, okay? Especially foods that are made with artificial sweeteners or sugar alcohols. So things like sugar-free Jell-O, protein bars, keto desserts. They might feel filling for a little bit, but if you eat too many of them, they can also give you like digestive issues and bloating. Now, me mentioning those foods does not make any of them bad, okay? Let's be clear about that. Remember, there are not good foods and bad foods. There's just foods. But they can make it harder for you to notice your fullness in the moment, especially if you pair them with other things like eating when you're distracted. Now, as we move on, I do want to acknowledge something, and that is the fact that saying you've had enough can sometimes feel pretty disappointing. That's something we don't really talk about enough. When you're physically full, sometimes you don't want to stop. Maybe the meal was amazing. Maybe that was a rare moment of peace in a stressful day. Maybe you just didn't want that experience to end, or you don't want to go back to your normal duties and obligations, okay? There's a real sadness in stopping sometimes, especially if that food was one of the few ways that you let yourself feel pleasure or comfort. Sometimes stopping does not feel empowering. That's not a character flaw, okay? That's human. It's valid. That sadness happens not because you're doing anything wrong, but because losing that feeling of enjoyment, even when you're full, frankly, sucks. So you might feel a little grief when you make the decision to stop, a pang of disappointment or longing. It's what we call the sadness of saying enough. It's a little grief for a nice experience. But I want you to ask yourself these questions. Did you get what you wanted out of that meal already? Hopefully, yes. Do you want to feel uncomfortably full? Hopefully, no. So take a few breaths and give yourself permission to step away. And if it helps, you can even say a little goodbye like you would on a great vacation, or do a little Marie Kondo method and just say, hey, you know what? Thank you for what you gave me before you throw it in the trash. And if you don't want to throw it away, you can put it in the fridge, pack it in a to-go box, save it for later. The meal doesn't disappear just because it's over. Whenever I talk about this, I think about one of the best meals that I ever had. And I remember going to this restaurant and having this meal, and I did manage somehow to stop when I was full. And I asked for a to-go bag. And we had a really great conversation with some friends, and we got caught up. And as I was leaving, I left the to-go box container in the restaurant. And I drove off, and I realized later, oh no, that delicious meal, I left it at the restaurant. And you know what? I was sad. But I was sad for about 10 minutes. And then I went on with the rest of my day. And that's how I want you to approach this. I understand it. You're going to experience a little bit of sadness, but it's really only going to be temporary. You're going to forget about it. And you know what? Your next meal is probably not that far off. Go about your day. And remember that you can always go back to that restaurant anytime you want. The more you practice these things, listening for your last bite threshold, knowing what fullness feels like for you, the more familiar it's going to become. It'll almost become second nature. Now, there's a fine line that you have to learn how to walk, okay? A lot of people have this temptation when they're trying to eat better to stop early, to cut yourself off before you're truly comfortably full. That way, you don't feel guilty. You don't risk overeating. That way, you still feel in control. But here's what I want you to try instead, okay? End on satisfaction, not restriction. Stopping because you're satisfied is a different feeling than stopping because you're scared. It's not, I should stop now. It's, I feel comfortably full. It's the difference between stopping because of trust and stopping because of fear. Don't be scared. Sometimes you're going to eat past your fullness, okay? Sometimes it's going to be really delicious and you're going to keep going. Sometimes you're going to miss the signal. That's okay. Sometimes you're going to forget to check in. That's okay too. Sometimes you're going to be emotional or distracted. It doesn't mean that you're bad. It doesn't mean you're undoing all your progress. Trust is built through repetition, not perfection. Society has this obsession with never feeling too full, but let's be honest, it happens. It will happen, especially when you're recovering from restriction or chronic dieting, or when you're learning how to hear your body's cues again. The goal isn't perfection. It never should be. It's just awareness. It's noticing, oops, I went a little past comfortable. What was going on there? With curiosity, not judgment, right? That's going to be a recurring theme, I think, in this podcast. Over time, you'll start to notice that sweet spot better and better, that place where you feel nourished, satisfied, and grounded, not stuffed, not deprived, just enough. Now, if after talking about all this stuff, fullness still feels confusing to you, if it feels like something you should be able to get right, but you can't, I want you to please hear this. This is a learning process. You're training yourself to have a better relationship with food and your body, to regain trust that you've been conditioned to ignore. And like any relationship, it takes time. It takes patience. You can do it. You're not broken. You've just been taught over and over again to ignore your body. Of course, it's going to be hard to listen to it now. I'm going to give you the permission that you might not know you needed, okay? You are allowed to eat until you're full. You're allowed to stop when you're satisfied. You are allowed to learn as you go. You don't have to clean your plate to be respectful, and you just have to practice listening again. And when it's difficult, and it will be, you've got to keep showing up anyway, because that's what progress looks like. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Showing Up Anyway. You can find it for free on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And wherever you're listening, if you like the show, I'd love it if you gave me a 5-star review, because that does help other people find the show, and hopefully it'll help change their life just like you're looking to change yours. If you're listening on Spotify, though, you can follow me and tap the bell icon so you get notifications when new episodes come out. I'm Coach Adam. Remember, when things get challenging, keep showing up anyway.